Imagine being in a factory in the 1920s. There's no HR department, no employee voice, no one asking how you're doing, just deadlines, machines, and silence. Then, one day, management adjusts the lighting in your workspace, and somehow, you start working more efficiently. Next, they dim the lights, and your productivity still improves. Strange? It baffled the researchers too. But this curious experiment sparked something bigger. It gave birth to a new understanding of human behavior at work, and laid the foundation for what we now call organizational development. Welcome to the story of the Hawthorne Studies, and how a few light bulbs lit up the future of work. In 1924, at the Western Electric Hawthorne Works in Chicago, a group of researchers wanted to understand how physical work conditions impacted productivity. They started with lighting. Brighter lights? Productivity went up. Dimmer lights? Productivity still went up. That didn't make sense, until they realized the real variable wasn't illumination. It was attention. The workers knew they were being observed. They felt noticed, valued. This would go on to be called the Hawthorne effect, the idea that people change their behavior when they know they're being studied. As Elton Mayo, the psychologist who led the research, later reflected in The Human Problems of an Industrial Civilization. What was important was not the physical conditions, but the human sentiment and the sense of being observed. Mayo initially aligned with Frederick Taylor's theory of motivation called scientific management, or Taylorism, which suggested that employees are primarily driven by monetary rewards. But Mayo strongly believed that human motivation went beyond just pay. Driven by this curiosity, he set out to explore what truly motivated employees in the workplace. At first, he hypothesized that physical factors, like lighting, work hours, or rest breaks, had the greatest influence. But as the experiments unfolded, a surprising realization emerged. It wasn't the working conditions that made the difference. It was the psychological impact of being observed and acknowledged. The simple act of paying attention to workers began to uncover the emotional and social dimensions of the workplace. The next phase took place in what became known as the Relay Assembly Test Room. Here, 5 women were selected and placed in a more relaxed setting. Researchers tried different interventions: rest breaks, shorter workdays, free conversations during work, even giving them some say in how the work was organized. And again, productivity rose consistently. Why? Because these workers weren't just treated as laborers, they were treated as humans, consulted, cared for, and part of a group. Gareth Morgan, in Images of Organization, called it a landmark moment. The Hawthorne studies revealed that informal organization, group dynamics, and emotional needs influence performance as much as rules or structure. This was no longer about factory output. It was the beginning of organizational behavior, and the philosophical roots of organizational development, OD. From these early insights grew an entire movement, organizational development. OD is about making organizations healthier, more human, and more effective through planned change. Donald L. Anderson, in his book Organization Development, The Process of Leading Organizational Change, writes, OD is grounded in humanistic values, that people matter, and that organizations thrive when they nurture collaboration, openness, and continuous learning. Thanks to the Hawthorne legacy, we now see team-building interventions, 360 degrees feedback mechanisms, employee involvement in change processes, appreciative inquiry and action research. The big lesson? Productivity doesn't come just from better tools or stricter rules, it comes from better relationships. Fast forward to 2012, and the questions being asked weren't too different. Google launched Project Aristotle to understand what makes a team effective. They studied over 180 teams, collected mountains of data, and found that the secret wasn't talent or IQ. It was something far more human. The top-performing teams shared 5 traits. Psychological safety. People felt safe to speak up without fear. Dependability. Members could count on one another. Structure and clarity. Roles and goals were clear. Meaning. The work felt personally significant. Impact. They believed their work made a difference. Amy Edmondson, author of Psychological Safety, writes, "Teams that feel safe are more likely to collaborate, take risks, and grow together." Google embedded these findings into leadership development and team design, echoing what the Hawthorne studies taught us nearly a century ago. The lesson repeated: human factors drive performance. In India, too, the Hawthorne legacy lives on. Companies like Tata Steel, TVS Motors Godrej, and many more have long embraced worker participation, quality circles, and shop floor engagement programs. These are all rooted in the same idea, that people are more than resources. They are partners in productivity. Even government initiatives like Skill Development Scheme, also known as Kaushal Vikas Yojana, emphasize emotional well-being, respect, and dignity, core elements of OD. And whether it's in factories or IT parks, HR today is learning that culture isn't built by policy. It's built by people. What started as a simple lighting experiment revealed something timeless. People work better when they feel seen, heard, and valued. From Elton Mayo's observations in the 1920s to Google's discoveries in the 2010s to your workplace today, the soul of organizational development remains the same. Involvement breeds ownership, recognition drives effort. Culture begins with connection, as Daniel Pink writes in his book, Drive. What truly motivates people isn't money or pressure. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. The Hawthorne studies didn't just change management. They reminded us that in the quest for productivity, we must never forget the person behind the performance. Up next, we explore how more theories and case studies shaped the modern HR. Until then, keep watching Behind the HR Cubicle by Hina Rai, where we decode HR one cubicle at a time.